My name is Detective Pierce. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the darkest secrets don't always hide in alleys or abandoned houses. Sometimes, they wait in places built for joy, where families used to laugh, where children pressed their faces against glass and marveled at the wonders inside. That's why the call unsettled me. The city council secretary spoke with a trembling voice, as if he were reading a death sentence. It's the Blue Abyss Aquarium. One of the guards didn't report back last night. Another was found this morning. In the central tank. No water. Just him. I'd heard of the Blue Abyss. Once the crown jewel of the city's waterfront. Glass domes, sprawling tunnels where the ocean seemed to surround you. Sharks, manta rays, whole ecosystems thriving behind panes of glass thicker than my arm. But the money dried up. Exhibits were sold off, staff dismissed. A temporary closure turned into years of silence. All that remained was an empty shell, glass cracked, steel corroded. Now there was a dead man inside. I arrived just past midnight. The front gates were wide open, swaying on their hinges as if inviting me in. Strange thing, on the breeze I caught a whiff of salt water. The real ocean was nearly an hour's drive away. The entrance lobby was a mausoleum of faded grandeur. Ticket booths buried under webs, posters peeling off the walls, dive into the mystery of the deep. The only mystery now was why anyone, or anything, still lingered here. I found the footprints first. Damp, fresh, though no rain had fallen in days. They led me into the main hall. And then I saw him. The central tank, once filled with thousands of gallons of water, was bone dry. Its massive glass walls were scarred with jagged streaks, as though something had clawed at them from the inside. At the bottom of the drained pool lay the guard. His eyes were wide, mouth frozen in a silent scream. The skin around his neck bore strange, circular marks, suction wounds, the kind you'd see from a giant squid. But that was impossible. This tank hadn't held a living creature in years. I crouched beside him, shining my flashlight across the floor. That's when I spotted the key. A small, battered piece of metal with a tag etched into it, Section D. I frowned. Blue Abyss never had a Section D on any of its public floor plans. Which meant it wasn't built for the public. I pocketed the key. When I rose to my feet, the beam of my flashlight swept across the glass. My breath caught. A wet handprint clung to the inside of the tank wall. Fresh. Dripping. Sliding downward. The sound hit me next, low, resonant, like a whale's call echoing through the bones of the building. The vibration rippled through the walls, through the air, through me. For a moment, I felt as though the aquarium itself was alive, breathing. And then, down one of the dark service corridors, a light flickered. Someone, or something, was moving. I tightened my grip on the Section D key. The answers were waiting in the hidden wing of this place. But for now, all I had was a corpse, suction marks, and the certainty that I wasn't alone. The further I walked into the service halls, the worse the stench of mildew became. The walls were lined with photos of brighter days, children smiling, divers feeding rays, families pointing in awe at glass tunnels filled with fish. The past mocked me from every frame. Near a rusted stairwell, I found an evacuation map bolted to the wall. Just as I thought, there was no Section D listed, which meant someone had deliberately erased it. The air ducts rattled. A splash echoed. Water trickled across the tiles, snaking between my shoes, winding its way toward the far hallway. It moved almost like it was alive. I followed. The trail of water slithered along the cracked tiles, a living vein leading deeper into the abandoned complex. I followed its shimmer, each step echoing too loudly in the silence. The corridor ended at a steel door. Heavy, industrial, its paint blistered from years of neglect. Rust bloomed along the hinges like rot spreading through flesh. Above the handle was a corroded sign, letters almost illegible under the rust, "Authorized personnel only." I tried the knob. Locked. Then I remembered the key. The tag read Section D. My fingers hesitated just a moment before sliding it in. The lock turned with a groan that reverberated through the whole frame, like the building resented my entry. Inside was no ordinary utility space. The air was colder, unnaturally damp, as though seawater had been bleeding into the walls for years. Dim emergency lights hummed above, their glow sickly green. The corridor stretched farther than it should have, vanishing into darkness. This was the hidden section. I moved slowly, scanning the walls with my flashlight. They weren't lined with pipes or wires like the rest of the service tunnels. Instead, thick glass panels embedded into the concrete revealed long, narrow tanks. Most were empty. But not all. In one, floating limply, was something that looked like a manta ray. But wrong. Its wings were too thin, stretched out like torn fabric. Where its mouth should have been was a ring of small, pulsating suction cups. As my light swept over it, the thing twitched, folding its wings around itself like a cloak. I stepped back. Every instinct told me this was no ordinary aquarium specimen. Further down, another tank held only water. But when I leaned closer, faint shapes shimmered within it. Human faces. Dozens of them, suspended just beneath the surface. Their mouths gaped silently, their eyes clouded. And when I blinked, they were gone. Just empty water again. A sound rose from the far end of the hall. Wet footsteps. I clicked off my flashlight. The darkness wrapped around me like a coffin. The footsteps drew closer, slow, deliberate, squelching against the damp floor. I held my breath, one hand tightening on the key in my pocket like it was a weapon. They stopped. Then something scraped along the glass nearest me, fingers, or something like them, dragging across the surface. I forced myself not to move. A few seconds later, silence. When I risked turning my light back on, the corridor was empty. But on the glass was a new mark, a handprint, long-fingered, webbed. At the end of the hall, I found an office. The door hung ajar. Inside, the stench of mold was nearly unbearable. Papers lay strewn across a desk, swollen and warped from damp. I picked through them, squinting at what text remained. Project Nautilus. Specimen retention. Behavioral testing. One folder contained photographs, creatures half-formed, hybrids of man and sea life. A man with translucent skin and bulging eyes. A woman whose arms had fused into fin-like appendages. Notes scribbled in the margins read, "Not sustainable. Subjects do not survive long outside containment. Further trials required. Section D to remain off public record." The deeper I read, the colder I felt. This wasn't just an aquarium. It was a lab. And something had been left behind. A creak pulled my attention to the corner of the room. A filing cabinet, half open. Inside, a tape recorder. Dusty but intact. I pressed play. Static hissed, then a man's voice, frantic. "We should never have done it. The ocean gives, but it takes back. The specimens, no, the prisoners, are changing faster than we can control. They whisper at night, calling from the tanks. Some of the staff are hearing them too. I think the water itself is alive down here. If anyone finds this, do not open the central reservoir. Seal it. Burn it if you must. Just don't let it out." The tape ended abruptly in a burst of static. Behind me, water dripped. Once. Twice. Then in a steady rhythm, like footsteps walking across the ceiling. I didn't look up. I pocketed the recorder and left the office, my nerves thrumming. As I retraced my steps, I passed one of the tanks again, the one with the distorted ray. It was gone. The water trail on the floor was thicker now, leading me farther into Section D. The corridor narrowed, walls closing in, the smell of salt and rot intensifying. And then I reached another door. This one wasn't rusted. It was reinforced steel, clean, with a biometric lock panel beside it. The key I had wouldn't work here. But on the door was a warning, scratched in haste with something sharp. Don't open. The dripping above me grew louder. A drop of cold water landed on my neck. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. The ceiling wasn't wet. It was breathing. The breath of the ceiling ceased as suddenly as it began, leaving only silence and the echo of my own pulse in my ears. I stepped back from the door with the etched warning, resisting the pull to touch the panel. Some doors aren't meant to open. I knew that. Still, the trail of water didn't end here. It slipped under the steel like veins feeding a heart. Whatever was locked inside wasn't dormant. I forced myself to move on, searching for another way deeper. The hall bent left, then right, a spiraling descent that felt unnatural. My compass needle spun uselessly. The architecture twisted like the building was folding in on itself. Finally, the hall emptied into a chamber. At its center stood a circular reservoir, massive, glass-sided, 10 meters across. Floodlights, long dead, hung around the rim. The water within was dark, too dark, as if it absorbed my flashlight beam. The surface was perfectly still. Too still. On the railing surrounding it were hooks for clipboards, tags for specimen numbers, but everything was stripped bare. A control console stood against one wall. Its switches were corroded, but one indicator light blinked faintly, still alive after all these years. Main containment, stable. Stable, I thought, staring at the opaque water. God help us if this was stable. I searched the console. A thin binder was jammed between two panels, left behind in panic. Its label was smeared, but inside I found pages that hadn't yet routed. Reports. Subject 9A Adaptive gill structures, increasing resilience. Aggression noted during feeding cycles. Subject 11C Extreme cognitive changes, auditory phenomena. Staff report voices even when tanks sealed. Subject 12 Deemed uncontainable. Terminated. Tissue samples archived. But the last entry was dated weeks before the aquarium's closure. The notes trailed into half sentences. Words scratched out. The final line. Reservoir integrity compromised. Recommendation, full evacuation. The blinking indicator above the console flickered. Stable turned briefly to warning before writing itself. That was when I heard it. From the water's surface, a ripple. Subtle. Too deliberate to be random. I froze. Another ripple, circling outward, though nothing had entered. Then a shape, no, a shadow, shifted beneath the surface. Long boneless. The ripple grew. Then stopped. And a face rose against the glass. Human. Or once human. Its skin was as pale as milk, its hair floating like weeds. The eyes were open but clouded, mouth hanging slack. Hands pressed to the glass. Fingers too long, nails black. It watched me. I staggered back, but the reservoir didn't break. The figure drifted sideways, slow, like a puppet on strings. And more joined it. Dozens of faces, bodies, drifting up from the black. None breathed. Yet I felt them exhale against the inside of my skull. Pierce. The voice wasn't sound, it was inside. Cold as brine, direct as thought. Every figure in the tank turned at once, eyes fixing on me. Pierce. I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles burned. "No," I whispered, though to whom I wasn't sure. "No, you don't know me." But the truth crawled icy into my gut. The ledger at the museum. The names in ink. These things, whatever they were, knew me before I knew them. The water boiled. I staggered back as the reservoir convulsed, waves slapping glass. Lights exploded one by one, plunging the chamber into darkness. Only my flashlight beam remained, shaking wildly in my grip. The glass bulged outward. A groan of tortured metal filled the air. And then silence. The reservoir calmed. The water stilled. The shapes inside dissolved into nothing. But the floor behind me was wet. I swung the beam down. Footprints. Bare. Webbed. Leading away from the reservoir toward the opposite door. And the indicator light on the console now glowed red. Containment breach. The trail drew me deeper, though every instinct screamed to turn back. I had to know where it led. Through another passage, past broken pumps and discarded lab coats, until I reached a stairwell spiraling up. The footprints grew erratic here, as if the thing climbed on all fours. Halfway up, I found something smeared on the wall. Words, finger-drawn in black sludge. The tide remembers. The letters dripped down the concrete like blood. A sound rose from above, a gurgling laugh, wet and hollow. Then the slam of a door. I chased it, my legs heavy, lungs burning. At the top, I burst into a room lined with shattered tanks. Water pooled everywhere. And at the far end, a door swayed open, leading back toward the public section of the aquarium. Whatever had escaped was no longer caged. And I was no longer alone in here. The door creaked on its hinges as I stepped through, my boots sloshing against water pooled half an inch deep. This was no longer the staff sector. This was where the public once strolled, parents tugging their children toward tanks filled with wonders of the sea. Now the place resembled a cathedral gutted by flood. The once bright murals of coral reefs had peeled from the walls. Glass panes of display tanks were spiderwebbed with cracks, empty of water, yet streaked inside as if something had clawed to get out. The informational placards lay face down in puddles, their text smudged into unreadable stains. Above, the painted ceiling, a panorama of constellations and fish, had warped. Shapes bulged outward, as though the ceiling itself had swollen with rot. But the most disturbing part was the sound. Not silence. Not exactly. It was the drip 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 of water falling from somewhere unseen, echoing like a ticking clock. And layered faintly beneath it, the hush of waves, as though the ocean pressed just beyond the walls, waiting to come in. The footprints I'd followed were clearer here. Webbed impressions darkened by slime, crossing the tile with jerking, unnatural gait. At times 2 prints. At times 4, as if the thing shifted between crawling and walking upright. They led me to the central exhibit hall. The Grand Ocean Tunnel, they once called it. A curved glass corridor that stretched beneath a massive tank, allowing visitors to feel as though they walked through the sea itself. I stepped inside. The tunnel arched over me, glass thick as stone, smeared with algae. But the tank it enclosed was empty. Nothing swam above. No water remained. Only darkness, and faint scrape marks etched along the glass interior. The footprints, however, did not stop. They went right down the middle of the tunnel, dragging lines between them as if something heavy had been hauled along. Halfway through I paused. Something reflected faintly above me. Not my own light, but a glow that pulsed irregularly, like the flicker of a lantern far away. I killed my flashlight. The glow remained. It moved above the tunnel, swaying side to side. A pale light, sickly green, trailing like fire through fog. And then a shape followed it. Long-angled, a silhouette dragging itself along the dry tank above me. Its limbs didn't bend right. Its head turned too far. Its mouth opened wide enough to split the jawline. And it carried the light. Not in hand, not in lantern, but in its chest. A glow burning within its ribcage. It paused above me. And then it turned. Its eyes, no, not eyes. Sockets lit from within by that same sea glow. They fixed directly on me. My breath froze. The creature pressed its face to the glass, mouth distending until teeth clinked against the barrier. Soundless. Grinning. The glow in its chest pulsed faster. And every light in the tunnel shattered at once. I ran. The glass overhead groaned as the figure skittered along, shadow keeping pace with me from above. My boots splashed through puddles, each step louder than gunfire. The tunnel stretched impossibly long, like it would never end. But finally, I burst into another chamber. The main viewing gallery. Here the devastation was worse. Benches overturned. Posters clawed down. The great central tank, once the pride of the aquarium, stood cracked and dry, its floor scattered with bones. I froze, my stomach turning. They weren't animal bones. Dozens of ribcages, spines, skulls lay in heaps inside the drain tank. Some human. Some not. All gnawed, as though chewed by something larger. Scrawled on the glass in smeared black letters were words that clawed directly into my skull. The tide remembers. The same phrase I had seen in the stairwell. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I spun. The tunnel lay empty now, though the glow still pulsed faintly through the glass above. And then I heard it, footsteps in the gallery, but not mine. Slow, deliberate, wet. I raised my light. At the far side of the gallery stood a figure. A man, or something wearing the shape of one. Drenched in seawater. Clothes tattered like kelp. His skin hung gray and stretched, veins black as ink. He held a book in his hand. A ledger. Pages dripping seawater that pooled at his feet. He lifted his face. The sockets were hollow. But his mouth moved. The names awaken. The vessel is chosen. I froze, my throat dry. Who are you? The figure shuddered, then spoke in a voice layered with dozens more, bubbling as if it came from underwater. We are the tide. We are what the hollow left behind. The drowned remember. He raised the ledger. Pages turned themselves in the still air. 3 names glowed faintly on the paper. Pierce. Harper. Rain. My stomach dropped. The thing tilted its head, mouth curving into a grotesque imitation of a smile. The sea does not forget. Then it collapsed, body falling into water that wasn't there. It dissolved into brine, leaving only the ledger floating on the surface before sinking out of sight. The footprints resumed, trailing toward another hallway. And I knew I had to follow. Not because I wanted to, but because my name was already written. My name was in the ledger. That truth clung to me like seawater in my lungs. I didn't remember moving, but my boots were already following the smeared trail of footprints through the gallery door. The corridor beyond was narrower, the air staler, every breath carrying the tang of brine and iron. Somewhere ahead, water dripped steadily, like a leaky faucet, or a clock marking down the seconds to something inevitable. The hallway bent into a spiral descent. The deeper I went, the more the walls glistened, lined with scales of black mold and salt crystals. Pipes ran overhead, groaning with unseen weight. At one turn, I passed a rusted placard, Research Wing, authorized staff only. The footprints led straight through. The room beyond was less an aquarium and more a laboratory. Tables upended. Papers plastered to the walls with slime. Glass jars filled with murky liquid. Inside them, things that should never have left the ocean floor. Fish with translucent skulls, their organs pulsing visibly. Eel-like creatures with limbs, too many joints bending the wrong way. And jars that no longer held anything living, only fragments of bone and teeth. I forced myself to keep walking. At the center of the lab sat a large steel vat, lid half pried open. Water sloshed inside, glowing faintly with the same green shimmer I'd seen in the tunnel. I stepped closer. The surface of the water rippled. Not from any movement of mine, but from something beneath, pressing upward. And for a moment I saw it. A face. Not the thing that stalked above the glass. Not the drowned man with the ledger. But my own. My reflection stared back, pale and corpse-like, mouth moving beneath the water as though whispering words I could not hear. I stumbled backward, slamming into a desk. The vat shook violently, then split open with a screech. Water poured onto the floor, rushing past my boots, flooding the tiles ankle-deep. From the water rose a hand, then another, pulling something massive out of the vat. The thing unfurled. Its torso human in shape, but stretched unnaturally long. Its ribs open, glowing faintly with the same tide light. Its head elongated, jaw gaping, teeth serrated like sharks. Where eyes should have been were twin voids filled with rolling seawater. And its arms dragged the ledger. Pages dripping. Names glowing. It stepped toward me, each movement sending ripples through the rising flood. I ran. Down another corridor, water chasing me like a living tide. My flashlight beam skittered across walls where murals of cheerful dolphins now twisted into grimacing shadows. Doors slammed behind me as though pushed by unseen hands. The hall ended in a staircase leading down. Always down. I descended, each step splashing into deeper water. My lungs burned with the reek of salt and rot. At the bottom I found myself in a chamber unlike any above. Not concrete. Not steel. Stone. Ancient blocks, slick with algae, formed an oval cavern beneath the aquarium. Carvings spiraled across the walls. Waves, fish, human figures kneeling before something vast. Something with too many arms, too many teeth. In the center of the cavern stood a stone altar. Upon it lay the ledger, open, pages flapping though no wind stirred here. Water cascaded down the walls like sweat from the stones. And behind the altar, the chamber did not end. It opened into black water. An underground sea, stretching into nothingness. Its surface churned though no wind touched it. The glow I'd followed all night pulsed deep beneath those waves, far larger now, too vast to imagine. I should have turned back. I should have left the cursed place to rot. But the ledger lay waiting, and my name glowed upon its pages. I stepped into the water. The tide licked higher up my legs, and the cavern trembled. From the black surface, shapes rose. Figures drowned yet walking. Faces hollow, skin shredded by barnacles. Some I recognized. Harper's features half dissolved, Rain's eyes hollowed. Their mouths opened in unison. The tide remembers. They circled me, water rising to my chest. Cold pierced to the bone, dragging at every breath. Behind them, something larger stirred. A head broke the surface. Then shoulders. Then arms stretching wider than the cavern walls. The thing that lived beneath the aquarium. The maw in the deep. It leaned forward, sea pouring from its mouth. Its voice was not a sound but a current pressing into my skull. Your name is written. The tide remembers. The tide will take. The ledger slammed shut on the altar. My name glowed brighter, burning through the leather cover. The drowned surged forward. Hands clawed my arms, my throat. Water filled my lungs. The cavern spun. The glow consumed me. And then silence. I woke on the shore at dawn. The aquarium stood behind me, whole again, glass reflecting the first light. No cracks. No slime. No bones. A trick of the night? A hallucination? I thought so, until I saw it. The ledger sat beside me on the sand. Waterlogged, pages fused. But my name still glowed faintly on the cover. And in the surf, for just a moment, I saw faces staring up from beneath the waves. Waiting. The tide remembers. And it has not finished with me yet.